Destinations around the world were once trying to keep tourists away. Now, do they actually want them back? How are governments balancing tourism and local citizenry demands? How are NGOs playing a role in governance and the local economy of destinations? How long will it take to overcome the tourism and COVID issue? Well, to discuss that, I want to invite an amazing panel again, and the moderator for that is Theresa Rifai, who's a partner at Consulum. So, Theresa, can you come up to the stage?
Hi, everyone. The growth of tourism has brought a tremendous amount of opportunity, but it's also brought a lot of problems. Over-tourism, environmental degradation, and irreversible damage to the very sites that tourists flock to see. How can we balance welcoming tourists and preserving the places and cultures that they come to visit? It's a very delicate balance since many attractions, among them national parks and archaeological sites, use tourist money to pay for their preservation. During COVID, I think the challenges to over-tourism have come into a much sharper focus. Many destinations use the pause in travel to find creative solutions to rebalance tourism, to maximize the benefits and also minimize the disruptions to locals and the other negative effects. Some have done this through marketing by encouraging tourists or even financially incentivizing them to visit at off-peak times or lesser-known places. Some have de-incentivized what they've called the flow of nuisance tourists, such as spring breakers and soft drug tourists to Amsterdam, for example. Others have tried to use such methods as time tickets to spread out visitors physically and over time. And some have used policy, like in the case of Venice, which has banned large cruise ships, or Barcelona, which has also banned short-term stays in the most touristic parts of the city. And finally, I think a lot of the most creative solutions have come in the area of transportation. For example, Barcelona again has modified bus routes so that tourists can be spread more evenly around the city instead of congregating in some of the more popular tourist spots. So it's my pleasure to introduce a fantastic panel that's going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Taleb Rifai, who needs no introduction. We all know that he's former Secretary General of the UNWTO. Thank you, Doctor. I'd also like to introduce Nikolina Angelkova. She's a member of Parliament and former Minister of Tourism, where she served from 2014 to 2020. And finally, virtually, I'd like to welcome the Honorable Tomohiro Kaneko, and he's joining us from the Japan Tourism Agency's International Tourism Department.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all.
Fantastic. So we're running a little bit behind on time, but we do have fewer people than we thought on the panel, so everyone will have the opportunity to speak in detail. So I'd like to begin with Dr. Rifai. What questions do you think that destinations should ask themselves and regarding the impact of returning tourism? What sort of questions should they be asking?
Thank you so much. First of all, we have to establish a principle. Travel is a human right now. It's not a choice. We have no right to prevent anybody from going anywhere. It's a fact. Therefore, what we have to do as destination is regulate that flow, either by seasonality, tackle seasonality, or places, to distribute them into places. The travelers, the new travelers of today, are not going to act like they acted in the past. That's for sure. But we need to design policies that voluntarily make people go to other places or come to that place at different times by promotion, like what the Minister of Economy and Digital Technology said. He's very correct about this, that the new norm is different. The new norm is much better, much more sustainable, for sure. Thank you.
Fantastic. And what are some of the ways that you've heard of that you're most impressed about regarding how destinations are balancing welcoming tourists and preserving the culture and places that tourists visit?
Now everybody's welcoming to it. Now it's not the right time to ask that question, because everybody is in need for tourism. But the way to do it is to promote other places, promote people to come another time. There is a town, for example, in Croatia called Opatija. I don't know if you heard about it. It's a seashore destination. It's a seaside destination for winter travelers, not for summer travelers. And they're advertising themselves as a winter destination, which is very interesting because they don't overcrowd them in summer. And the way they're promoting that is having a man and a woman sit at the beach, covered by a blanket, and saying it's more romantic to visit Opatija in winter. So you have to spend some money on promotion of place and time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Dr. Rifai. Minister Angelkova, when you were Minister of Tourism, you enabled the government to put in place some data collection technologies that permitted you to really understand more what the tourism flow was like at different properties and attractions across the country. How did you gather that information, and what did you use that information for?
Thank you, Theresa, for this very good question. But first of all, I would like to start saying something that, of course, all of us know, that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, tourism sector together with the air transportation are the most affected one. And including, there are lots of arguments between tourism ministers and health ministers as regarding the measures that should be taken in a way to address the COVID-19 prevention. Before COVID, Bulgaria was welcoming more than 9,300,000 international arrivals. It was in 2019, of course, COVID stopped everything. And due to that, at my times in 2019, we managed, after, I should say, 4 or 5 years of discussions and trying to get everybody on board, to create an electronic tourism system in compliance with all the regulations as regarding personal data preservation, because this is very important, but to connect the Ministry of Tourism system with the local authorities system, with the system of all accommodation places, restaurants, including the income authorities, which actually gives us now the opportunity to make a very deep analysis regarding the tourists that are visiting the country and which places in the country they are visiting in terms of preferences, age, nationalities, everything that is required for any stakeholder in the sector to plan accordingly, because now, post-COVID, it's really important to plan together with everybody involved, including the NGOs, and of course to improve, where needed, the tourism quality product. As tourists that I notice now in the summer that is already at its end, also including in Bulgaria, that many visitors want also to diversify product and visit not only a country for sun and beach or the winter just for the snow, but to have additional experience related to culture, tradition, food, history, everything. And this really is a good momentum to use the COVID crisis as an opportunity to improve.
Fantastic. And just following up on that, we had discussed a little bit a few days ago about how sometimes the federal government is not the only source of ideas about how to avoid over-tourism. And you mentioned the example of Bulgaria and how local government and also locals have really contributed many meaningful and creative ideas to prevent over-tourism. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Absolutely, but I would like to underline that in Bulgaria, the over-tourism can be faced only on our Black Sea coast and the summer tourism, because let's say out of these 9,300,000 international visitors in 2019, almost 6 million were only along the Black Sea coast from June to September. So our strategy and action plan, I'm happy that it's ongoing and it's not changed from the caretaker minister right now, but is to really diversify and direct international tourists within the country, because we have so many places in every other country. That's why we have changed the tourism law, and we created tourism councils upon each municipality, which in Bulgaria there are 266 and 65, together with the NGO and the business from the sector, to decide about the local strategy, the ideas and the funding, and to be able to secure that there will be some funding available, not only coming from the private sector, but common funding. All the tourist taxes are allocated only to the local budgets of the municipalities, including some taxes from concessions, depending if there is a concession in the municipality related to it. So we try in this way to get a sustain ideas for tourism, and really to, let me use that word, to direct tourists not only along the, as I said, the Black Sea coast, but internally. And this to happen needs a lot of work in terms of marketing, in terms of advertisement, and in particular now considering the new technologies coming up, we have prepared a digitalization strategy. I think this will really help promoting better Bulgaria in our case.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And Kaneko-san, thank you so much for joining us virtually. We know that many of the travelers to Japan restrict themselves just to the island of Honshu, which is where Tokyo is located. So how has Japan tried to get visitors to try the other islands, Hokkaido, Shikoku, Kyushu, Okinawa as well? What are some of the strategies that you've adapted to try to spread out those tourism groups more evenly among the islands?
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to thank Theresa for moderating this panel. And I'd also like to express my appreciation for the distinguished panelists today. And please allow, I would like to apologize for my very casual attire, because here in Tokyo, it's almost around midnight. So, but in any event, I would like to reply to the question from the Theresa about how we could get visitors to explore other islands than Honshu. Well, after experiencing COVID-19, we understand that tourists, regardless of whether they are Japanese or they are foreigners, tourists tend to travel in a small group as well as to avoid crowds. Therefore, we would like to promote Japanese rural areas like Hokkaido, Shikoku Island, and Kyushu, and even Okinawa as attractive destinations for enjoying outdoor activities such as skiing, cycling, hiking, and glamping. And by doing that, I believe that more tourists would visit other parts of Japan. And also, what we need to do is to improve our kind of infrastructure, like how we could get those people easily on the airplane or in a Shinkansen bullet train. For example, in the Shinkansen bullet train, the railway companies have added the extra seat for the visitors who have big luggage, like traveling all around Japan for, say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They have a very big luggage, and in Shinkansen, it used to not to have many spaces, but right now the railway company have added the extra spaces for those visitors. So we need to improve those types of equipments and so on in order to have more visitors traveling in the Japanese rural areas. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We know that Japan and several other countries, particularly in Asia, have been a little bit slow to open up to tourists. They're prioritizing the safety of residents over the restarting of tourism, at least temporarily. Do you believe that they think that tourist equals COVID? And if so, how do you think we can get over that perception?
Well, it's a very delicate question, and but I would say that we Japanese does not equate foreign travelers with COVID-19. But at the same time, it is true that we have experiencing now the very big wave of Delta variant right now. We are still under the state of emergency situation until the end of this month, which means we have a little bit of delay in opening our borders. But it is meant to protect the safety of residents here in Japan while we work to get everyone vaccinated. Our government now sets as early as November as a target to inoculate all who would like to be vaccinated. And right now, in fact, we have more than 50% of Japanese people who have already got 2 vaccine doses. So it is moving quite well, I would say. I understand that other Asian countries, such as Singapore, and Thailand, and even Australia, have now started to strike a very delicate balance between the how they could grow economic activities, including tourism, and protection of their own people. But I would say we are very close to improving the border measures in order to welcome the foreign tourists, possibly soon. Thank you.
Fantastic. And finally, I think Japan has done a fantastic job through its temple stays and through ryokans to attracting people to the Japanese countryside. You know, as you're reopening, are you kind of revisiting those models? Is there anything that you are doing to try to make that model more attractive to more tourists, particularly international tourists?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And after experiencing COVID-19, I believe that we need to make progress in many of aspects. Even though we had more than 32 million people visiting Japan in 2019, it is right now we don't have many tourists right now. So we need to start from zero, actually. So as I mentioned, there are many things that are necessary to improve. First example will be the accommodation. And as Theresa mentioned, we had many excellent Japanese-style accommodations called ryokan. But the problem is that the ryokans offer only traditional Japanese cuisine for the, say, morning, lunch, and dinner. And but if you could stay at ryokan that serves wide varieties of cuisine, such as Chinese or French or Italian or whatever, very wide range of cuisine in cooperation with the local restaurants, then it would greatly attract visitors who might be less adventurous about their food than about their travel. And probably even for me, it will be quite difficult to eat every time Japanese traditional cuisine. So we believe that those types of providing options to tourists, not a one-size-fits-all solution, would be a great way to get more people to try our traditional lodging options, and which possibly would make them stay for much longer period in Japan. That would be quite a contribution to gain more foreign people visiting Japan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Rifai, as destinations are examining the ways to address future over-tourism, obviously the domestic market is key. During COVID, when borders were closed, countries and cities had the opportunity to road test a lot of these creative solutions that we're talking about. What have you done, or what have you seen done in the sense that has encouraged the domestic traveler to travel at different times, experience new things, travel to destinations that they normally wouldn't travel to within their own country?
Thank you so much. That's a very important question. Domestic tourism is a different ballgame on its own. Domestic tourism needs to be thought of differently by tour operators, by all the businesses, because you don't operate the same way as international tourists. Now the problem with developing countries, many of the developing countries did not consider domestic tourism even. A tourist is only somebody coming from outside, a blonde with a blue eye coming from Mars, treated like a king, like a god, which is not right. If you look at Europe or United States, 70 to 75% of travel is domestic. Anyhow, I think a country that's not enjoyed by its own people, not traveled in by its own people, cannot and should not be enjoyed by anybody else. First, you should learn how to travel in your own country. To do that, you need to create a different mindset. For example, vacation are not the same as European or international vacations. They depend on national vacation. Look at China, for example. The Chinese New Year is the best season for traveling domestically. Chinese New Year is not celebrated anywhere outside of China. It's in February. Anyhow, February is not a good month for Europeans to travel. So domestic tourism is very important, but it has to be dealt with completely differently on its own. Now we can learn a lot from that, yes, but I think we should encourage domestic tourists to travel within their own country, especially in developing countries, because when we do that, we shouldn't depend on the stage of development of that country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Minister Angelkova, in Bulgaria, what have you done to try to encourage domestic tourists to learn more about their own country? We spoke a little bit a few days ago about product development. Can you give us a little bit more detail about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Theresa, for this question. Domestic tourism is very, very important now, in particular during COVID, because due to the travel restrictions in some countries, we all rely on our tourists to visit all the touristic places and sites within Bulgaria. Of course, we are very happy that the Bulgarians has discovered Bulgaria as a tourist destination, but Bulgaria being a small country, in order to reach the levels of tourism that we had before COVID in 2019, we can't do that without the international arrivals. Of course, we offer, as I said, a very diverse product, combining experience, combining adventure in some cases, tradition, food, culture, spa and wellness. Bulgaria, by the way, is very rich of natural hot water resources. We are second in Europe after Iceland, and this is a very good niche that we are focusing right now, considering spa and wellness and health tourism, in particular now with COVID, because I think the natural mineral water could help a lot as regarding pre and post rehabilitation and treatment house procedures. So to encourage, back to your question, to encourage Bulgarians to visit Bulgaria, we have launched together with the local medias and local stakeholders, different marketing campaigns, including some of the hotels and restaurants were very innovative to offer some promotion for them to visit their places and resorts, which actually now this summer ending shows that there is a booming in terms of of domestic tourists that have visited the country, but still they are quite below the numbers we were used to have in 2019. But yes, diverse product with a very good quality, because and this is really good. People and tourists that are traveling now, they are much more demanding and in the good way, and paying attention on the quality offered. Because what was happening before COVID, in particular in some very known destinations, everybody from the tourism sector was thinking that is something that is existing and it's done, not that we have to fight for. Now COVID shows how fragile the sector is and how big efforts, common efforts, need to be put together. I remember in the previous panels, the Minister of Jamaica, Edmund Bartlett, said that now the competition has to be to compete together to return tourists in our places, but with a very good quality of tourism services offered, considering all the health requirements to preserve on one side our personal health, and on the other side to have the very good experience as tourists we want to have. And of course, simultaneously, without forgetting that tourism is one of the best and important economic, let's say, sectors, part of each economy of a country, which is crucial for the GDP of the country. For Bulgaria in 2019, again, unfortunately, we're always addressing that data because now the figures are very different. It was from 12 to 14% from the GDP, very important for the economy and giving more than 300,000 jobs, which has to be preserved.
Perfect, thank you so much. And Kaneko-san, also your experience in Japan, are there any experiences, tours, other products and services that have been developed now during COVID time that you think, that you're confident will help reduce over-tourism in the future when you start welcoming international visitors back again?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And first on domestic tourism, I would say that the COVID-19 has forced every country, including Japan, to rely on the domestic tourism, or maybe I would say rethinking about the how we tackle the domestic tourism. In the case of Japan, the consumption by the travelers is the majority coming from domestic tourism. This is the reality, and in early 2020, like April or May in 2020, all the markets, domestic and for inbound tourism and outbound tourism, all are almost zero. And what we were doing at the time was how we could boost our domestic tourism. And that's why we introduced the policy of system of Go to Travel, which provide discounts to the domestic travel up to 50%. This had a huge impact on the stimulating a domestic tourism market. And what we have realized is the when we turned to domestic tourism was there are many more attractive destinations throughout Japan in terms of tourism from tourism from foreign countries, and so and also at the same time we have cities like Kyoto, which were bothered by the over tourism, and they had a huge committee to discuss what type of a city they would like to develop in terms of tourism. They discuss this issue not only from the tourist companies, but also from say residents and transportation companies, and many stakeholders are getting involved in this discussion, and they try to how they could entertain the tourists, both from domestic and from foreign countries, as well as how they could satisfy their residents and they could provide benefits to them. So this type of discussion and sentiment is very widespread throughout Japan, and this is a quite good thing when we try to welcome the foreign tourists in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that, is this on? On? Okay. I think that touches on what we discussed as one of the main takeaways, which is that it's very important to be consulting the locals, be they residents or local governments, in order to come up with some of these creative solutions to prevent over-tourism from returning again, once COVID is brought under control. And I think another takeaway, and I don't know if we're allowed to have two instead of one, but the second one would be the use of data and technology in order to get to know what the tourism flows are like and to be able to really capitalize on them, to be able to deseasonalize tourism and also ensure that tourists visit a larger array of places. So thank you very much.